So hi, NextGen friends. Good morning. Welcome to our student loan repayment workshop. If you're looking for information regarding student loans, then you're in the right place. First, I want to introduce myself. You may know me from some email sends already, but my name is Kimberly Sanchez, and I'm an Education Policy Associate here at NextGen Policy. And today's webinar is brought to you by NextGen and in partnership with the Student Debt Crisis Center. So before I pass it off to my friends to introduce themselves, I'll share a bit more about our organizations. So many of you may know NextGen for the work that we do around student debt and college affordability, but we are a multi-issue organization and we're based in California. We do also advocate for progressive policy, legislative and programmatic issues in the areas of climate, digital equity, food insecurity, and workforce development. And like I mentioned, I focus on education, and through that work, we're grateful for the partnership that we have with Student Debt Crisis Center. So, Student Debt Crisis Center, they're a national advocacy organization with 2 million supporters calling for fundamental reforms and to student loan policies and to end the student debt crisis. And with that, I'll pass it to Sabrina and Natalia to introduce themselves.
Hi, all. I'm Natalia Abrams, with President at Student Debt Crisis Center. Thank you to all the SDCC folks that joined today. As Kimberly said, if you are here to learn more about your student loans, you are in the right place. And today we're joined by Sabrina Calazans, our Executive Director, and Angel Renteria. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, so please correct me, but they're from our team here to answer your questions.
Thanks, Natalia. And with that, I'd like to note, as you can see on the screen, this webinar will be recorded. And so that we can get through as much information in today's webinar, the audience members' microphone and video are muted, but the Q&A box at the end of your screen is available. So please drop in your questions there, and we'll be going over questions towards the end of the webinar. And as we've seen many headlines about student debt questions recently, please note that all of the information in today's webinar is as accurate and up to date as of this moment. And with that, I'll pass it to Natalia for some federal updates.
Thanks, Kimberly. And very good point that we see student loan policy and plans kind of changing all the time. So we want to be really clear that this is the information that we know as of today, June 10th. And let's go over some of the updates. So there have been changes at the Department of Ed. If you've been following along in the last few months, multiple executive orders to try to dismantle the Department of Education, to try and limit access to public service loan forgiveness, depending on the place that you work. There's an ongoing negotiated rulemaking process to make changes to public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment plans. And through all of this, part of one of the executive orders was reducing the workforce at the Department of Ed more than 50%. What's important to note right now is that nothing has actually changed with your student loan. Even though there's all these threats that we're talking about with federal updates, all of the programs we're talking about today still exist. If you have a federal loan, the Department of Education is still the loan holder. You might have a different servicer, but none of that has changed. That leads into that next big bullet point, that comments made about this student loan portfolio from President Trump of moving student loans to the Small Business Administration. That has not happened yet. That is, again, another threat. And as I mentioned, the Department of Ed still owns your loan. We do know that with income-driven repayment plans, if you've been applying or trying to switch into plans, there have been extreme processing delays. And the SAVE plan has been removed from options of repayment plans. So if you're in the SAVE forbearance, you're still safe, but you can no longer apply to be in the SAVE plan. In addition, we are in the middle of a reconciliation process, or creating the budget for our country. Unfortunately, this has already passed the House, which is $350 billion of cuts to education. This includes cuts to the student loan portfolio, and could impact us as student loan borrowers. And we will continue doing these workshops with NextGen on our own to give you the most up-to-date announcements as they come out. But the current proposal for reconciliation would limit federal aid and grant amounts. This includes Pell Grants. We would see a lot of folks that currently qualify for Pell Grants not be able to receive them. It eliminates subsidized loans. They're trying to eliminate the Parent Plus and Grad Plus loans. They want to create a new standard plan, which your standard would be 10 to 25 years. Currently, it's at 10 years, and we'll go over that. But if you had a higher loan balance, it could be a longer payoff time. And they want to scrap most of the repayment programs that we'll talk about today. But again, they still exist. I can't stress that enough. But create a new plan called the Repayment Assistance Plan, which would be 30 years in repayment versus 20 or 25 years. You'd have to have a minimum of a $10 payment. Once you're in, you cannot get out. And this would be available to you and current borrowers. This is all to say we do not accept this. We have been working with NextGen, with a whole coalition of student loan nonprofits that are fighting against these current proposals to reconciliation. We do not want to see income-driven repayment plans go away or limits to public service loan forgiveness. And lastly, we know we get a lot of folks that are in the SAVE plan and they want to know what to do. We're going to go more in depth with that. But if that's a question you have right now, there is still income-based repayment that has been legislated, determined by legislators and law. And so that, again, these still exist as of now. And with that, I'm going to throw it back to Kimberly.
Thanks, Natalia, for those timely updates, even though they are unfortunate to hear. So as you see on the screen, this is the overview of today's workshop. What we'll be going over, we'll go over the basics of loans, repayment plans, getting out of default, loan forgiveness options, and then at the end, we'll have Q&A. And again, this information is as accurate as it is based on today. Things, are ever changing and they may not be accurate tomorrow, but as of today, this is the most up-to-date information that we have. And also just a disclaimer that we're not financial counselors or attorneys. We're just advocates and experts who want to help. So how do I protect myself with the recent changes to the student loan system? What can you do right now? You need to make sure that your student loan servicer, who they are and if they have access to your account on the website. You need to save all the communications and documents you've had with them. Make sure to print them, to download, to screenshot, to have tangible copies of them because they may not be available later on. And also, if you qualify for it and consider enrolling in IBR, an income-based repayment plan. So IBR is written into law, so technically it's the most secure plan. We don't know what will happen right now to income-driven repayment plans, but we'll continue to communicate changes. And so now I'll go over the student loan types and servicers. So just to make sure that everyone can be sure to understand what type of loan that they have. So as a student loan borrower, you may either be carrying federal student loans or private student loans. And please note that it is common to have a mix of both federal and private loans. And most of the information that we'll be covering today is relevant to federal student loans as private loans, unfortunately, aren't eligible to be covered by federal repayment plans and other programs. And under federal student loans, there are also different types of federal loans. So Perkins loans, FFELP loans, or federal family education loans. Perkins and Phelps are older programs, so there aren't any new borrowers under these loans, and they've been discontinued, but there are certainly borrowers who are still hold these loans and are still paying them off. And so if you have a direct student loan, you may also have a direct subsidized loan, and direct subsidized loans, direct graduate plus, direct parent plus, or direct consolidation, as you can see on the screen, the helpful graphic. So these loans all have different terms in such as direct subsidized loans don't start getting charged interest while you're enrolled in school or during your 6-month grace period. And while direct unsubsidized loans start accumulating interest from the date of the first loan disbursement, and that's the same for FFELP loans. You may have one of the different loans under this program, subsidized or unsubsidized, Stafford, FFELP, and consolidations. And so, what are student loan servicers? So student loan servicers are the companies that service your loans and they take your payments and apply it to your account. They process paperwork like any repayment plan, enrollment that you may do. The federal government, as you know, holds many student loans, and so the Department of Education contracts with loan servicers to handle all of these accounts. So hopefully this visual on the screen will be able to help you identify if you have federal student loans or private loans, depending on your servicer. And please note that the private student loan servicers may not necessarily be lenders. They can just be a servicer that is contracted by a private lender to service your loan. Besides this list, you can also tell if your loan is a federal loan or private loan in a couple of different ways. But one of the easiest ways is if the loan shows up on your studentaid.gov account. Then they are most likely a federal loan and not a private loan. And we'll get into that in the next few slides. So with that, we're going to go over how to use how to make sure you have access to your federal student loans through the Federal Student Aid Office at studentaid.gov. So if you want to see all your federal loans and see what repayment and debt forgiveness options are available to you, you should always start at studentaid.gov. Be sure to type in the website exactly as you see it on the screen into your internet browser. If you just search for studentaid.gov, then sometimes other websites pop up that could open up to scammers. And we'll, also go over that later today to make sure you know how to avoid traps like that. But there have been updates to the website, so hopefully understanding your loans on your account should be much easier to process with the updated dashboard. And we'll go over more on that in just a moment. So when you try to access your account at studentaid.gov, this is what the login page will look like. If you don't have an account yet, you can see at the bottom where you can create one. And if you're having any issues with logging in or resetting your password, please call the number on the screen, 1-800-433-3243, and the Department of Staff can help you. I say this kind of like with an asterisk because, as we know, there have been mass layoffs at the Department of Ed, and it's getting harder and harder to actually reach someone. So here's a dashboard of an example of what your student aid account may look like. At the top, make sure that you're logged into your account. It says your name, make sure your personal information is all up to date. And so that the Department of Education can be able to send you notice on updates, you need to make sure that your information is up to date. And so you'll see on the bottom of the screen, there's a section towards there's a section titled My Loan Servicer, and here's where you'll see if any of your federal loan servicers, if any of your loan servicers are federal. In this example, this borrower only has one federal loan servicer, which is Mohila, and the link servicer to that website is provided. You should also make sure you have the contact information for your servicers, and you can make online accounts with each servicer too. Again, private student loan servicers will not show up here. So if you have been for example, getting mail from Wells Fargo about one of your student loans, but you don't see them here, then that's another indication that you have a private student loan instead of a federal student loan. So we want to quickly go over the details section of your student aid account. So towards the middle of the screen, you'll see view details, and that's the blue button. And then you'll see my aid section. If you click on view details, you'll get a breakdown of your federal student loan. So once you click on the view details, this is what it should look like. A section that summarizes the federal loans you have, the servicers, and your total loan balance broken down by principal and interest. If you scroll from the summary, you'll see a section called loan types, and that will provide you with the details of your different federal loan types and balances for each of those loans. So if you remember from the earlier slide, this example shows a borrower has 11 federal loans, and it looks like they have a mix of loans under the direct loan program and 3 Perkins loans. Next slide, please.
Oh, just real quick, Kimberly, on this slide, I wanted to cover like that I mean, did the slide switch? Does everyone see the Department of Ed dash Mohila?
Yes, that's what I see.
Okay. So just on this page, you can see your loan status if you're in repayment. This borrower is on the SAVE plan, which we know many of you are, and they are in a forbearance, and that is the SAVE forbearance. So looking at this, it will show the loan status, the repayment plan, where, subsidized loan, where that's coming from. And this is where you would know that if you're in a forbearance, a deferment, or in repayment or in a repayment plan. So this is a very important slide to understand that. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you, Natalia. And with that, I'll pass it to Sabrina to talk about different loan repayment options.
Thanks, Kimberly. And thank you all for hanging on and following along with all of this information. I know it's a lot, but we have a lot to cover, so let's jump right into what some of our options are. So, as Natalia was saying before, there are different types of repayment plans varying over multiple years. So, the first plan that we see here is the 10-year standard repayment plan. Once you first enter into repayment, borrowers are initially placed into this plan. So this is a 10-year repayment plan with fixed monthly payments. This 10-year repayment period applies to anyone who has unconsolidated loans or folks with consolidated loans with a balance less than $7,500. If you are looking to make a dent in your student loan debt amount, if you're worried about interest accumulating very quickly, and or if you just want to get out of the system in general, we recommend the 10-year standard plan. That is the fastest plan. However, we do acknowledge and understand that that repayment plan is just not feasible for so many folks. And so there are more affordable options for folks who are struggling to afford this monthly payment amount. In addition to the 10-year plan, there's a 30-year standard. If you could just go back one slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So the 30-year standard plan is for folks who have consolidated loans. So if you've consolidated at any point, you would not be eligible for the 10-year, you'd only be eligible for the 30-year. This is based on your loan balance. So again, if we look at the chart here, if your balance is less than 7,500, it would be a 10-year repayment period. However, if you have more than 60,000 in student loans, it would be the full 30 years. Now, for these standard plans, you would be in repayment until you pay off the entire balance. There's no loan forgiveness aspect associated with this plan. But again, we acknowledge that the standard plan is not affordable for everyone. So there are additional repayment plans available that we're going to get into shortly. Now, if we're looking at a chart of the existing repayment plans, we begin with the standard plan that everyone is placed into, and then there are 2 different options. So if you don't want the standard plan, there are income-driven repayment plans, and those are the more popular plans, and that's what we're going to really cover in depth today. So of the income-driven repayment plans that we're going to refer to, I'm going to say IDR a lot, so that's what we're talking about here. IDR is the umbrella term, so of the IDR plans, there's ICR, which is income contingent repayment. There's IBR, which is income-based repayment. There's an old version and a newer version of the plan. There's the pay-as-you-earn plan. And then we have the SAVE plan here in red because it does exist and folks are enrolled in the SAVE plan. However, folks cannot enroll in it right now. And if you are enrolled, you're in the SAVE forbearance. So we're going to get into that very shortly. And it's also worth noting that the IBR plan and the pay plan, not everyone is eligible for that, for those plans. Now, in addition to standard and the income-driven repayment plans, there are also these alternative plans. There's graduated repayment, extended repayment, and extended graduated repayment. These are similar to the standard plan in which there's no loan forgiveness aspect. However, there are different pieces to the puzzle here and qualifications that folks need to meet in order to become eligible for that. So we will cover that in a bit. Now let's take a look at the next slide here and look at the IDR plans in which action is required. No one is placed into an IDR plan without taking action. So let's take a look at these plans. So what are the benefits of IDR plans in comparison to the standard plan? IDR plans are not based on your loan amount. They are calculated as a percentage of discretionary income. So it's going to be based on your income and your family size. So for folks who have a very high balance, this could be more helpful. If you have a lower income, this could be something that could secure a lower monthly payment for you. Again, it's more affordable than the standard plan. This is especially helpful for folks who have lower incomes, who may have lost a job, or who have decreased incomes. If you're also a seasonal worker, you can recertify when you have a lower income or when you're not working so that you can lock in a $0 payment so that you don't have to make higher payments throughout the year, especially when you're not working. Another benefit to income-driven repayment plans is that it helps to prevent folks from falling into delinquency and default status. Now, we're going to talk about what delinquency and default is. And if you are currently in delinquency and default, we will talk about ways that we can get you out of that and provide assistance. I know it's a very difficult topic for folks to talk about, but it is something that we need to cover and make sure that folks are informed about. And as I said, when you enroll in an income-driven repayment plan and you certify your income, you're locking in that payment for 12 months, which is really great. So even if your income changes, um, the following month, you're still going to be on that low monthly payment for the next 12 months. Now, the downside of the IDR plans in comparison to the standard plan is that it does extend the loan repayment period to 20 to 25 years, depending on the plan and your loan types. So instead of the 10 to 30 range, it's going to be 20 to 25. Now, on the next slide, we're going to talk about what does IDR forgiveness mean? What is the loan forgiveness that comes with this plan? Now, every month that you make a payment while you're enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, you get a credit. So if your payment term is 20 years, you would need to have 240 credits. If your repayment term is 25 years, you would need to have 300 credits. Again, this varies depending on your plan and your loan types. Now, once you reach that 240 or 300, you essentially become eligible for IDR forgiveness. And that means that the remaining balance of your loans is supposed to be processed and forgiven. You would have that all forgiven. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, it's worth noting that we understand folks go through, deferments and forbearances and tough times. And so any periods that you are enrolled in a deferment or forbearance, or if you've fallen into default, those periods of time do not count towards IDR forgiveness, including the SAVE forbearance right now. We're going to get more into SAVE and what that means for you and what options you have, but that is really worth noting that you're not getting these credits towards IDR forgiveness. If you've been in repayment for 20 to 25 years and you've already hit that threshold, right now folks are in limbo because of this ongoing litigation. So if you're not currently enrolled in the income-based repayment plan, IBR, your loans are essentially in limbo and unable to be processed and forgiven. So if this is you and you're not enrolled in IBR, we recommend calling your servicer, seeing if you are eligible for IBR, and potentially enrolling yourself in that plan so that you can have your loans forgiven that way. That is the only plan that is allowing for IDR forgiveness at this time. Now, before I was saying a term called recertification. So income verification or recertification is when you are providing income and family size information to your loan servicer. So as I said, you're locking in that payment amount for 12 months. So ideally, every 11 months, you will need to recertify and let your servicer know that your income is still the same or it has changed. That is something that is required for everyone who's enrolled in an IDR plan. Now, it's every 12 months, but we recommend 11 months because technically you need to have the income recertified 10 days before the 12-month mark. So we don't want to confuse anyone. We're going to say 11 months just to be careful. So I would recommend that if that's you. But it's worth noting that you can fill out this IDR application or recertification online, or you can submit a paper form. And right now, income recertification is not required by anyone until February 2026 at the earliest. So if you haven't recertified since before the pandemic, that's fine. We've been seeing that for a lot of folks. However, it's also worth noting that if your income has decreased significantly at any point or significantly since the last time you recertified, you can recertify now to lock in that lower monthly payment. So make sure that you are keeping track of this. If you're seeing communication from your servicer about the need to recertify post this February 2026 date, please make sure that you're taking it seriously because there are consequences of interest capitalization and compounding that can happen as a result of not recertifying your income. All right, so to go quickly over this again, the different types of IDR plans are the income contingent repayment plan. Everyone is eligible for this plan. It is the only IDR option available for folks with Parent Plus loans. It looks at 20% of your income over a 25-year mark. The older version of the IBR plan is available to borrowers with loans before July 1st, 2014. It's 15% over 25 years. The newer version is for borrowers as of July 1st, 2014, with a lower payment generally estimated in comparison to that older version, and it's 10% over 20 years. For the pay-as-you-earn plan, it's for borrowers, new borrowers as of October 2007 who received a loan after October 2011. It's 10% over 20 years. And the SAFE plan is the newest repayment plan, but again, folks can no longer apply and it's paused due to litigation. As a reminder, IBR and Pay both have financial hardship eligibility requirements. You can absolutely call your servicer or go on the loan simulator to see if you qualify for those plans. And you can find all of this information at studentaid.gov if you're looking to switch into a new repayment plan. So we covered standard, we covered IDR. Now let's talk about the alternative repayment plans. So if none of the other options are a good fit for you, there are these plans which are variations of the standard plan. Again, there's no forgiveness portion attached to these repayment plans. It's just paying off the entire balance over a longer period of time. So the first one is the extended repayment plan. Only folks with balances higher than 30,000 are eligible for this plan. All loans are eligible except for Perkins loans. If you have Perkins loans but want to enroll in these plans, you can consolidate to become eligible. The payments on extended are fixed. That's really important to know. And the repayment timeline is 25 years. Now, the graduated repayment plan, all loans are eligible except for Perkins. Same thing applies. The payments here are not fixed for graduated. The payments start low and increase every 2 years. And the repayment timeline depends on your loan types and your balance. So if you have FFEL and direct consolidation loans, it varies between 10 to 30 years. All other loans would be a 10-year repayment plan. An example of what that looks like is for someone who has about $30,000 balance and is looking to enroll in graduated, your first payment could be around $150, but your final payment at the end of the term limit would be about 500 plus. So it really is a big jump over the years. The expectation they have is that you're going to earn more money at the end of your career or, working towards your career. So it is important to note that the payments do increase. And now the extended graduated is a combination of both the extended and graduated plans in which the loan eligibility requirements are the same. The repayment timeline is over 25 years and the payment amount does go up every 2 years. So These are in addition, or these are a variation of the standard plan and are options for folks to consider. So that's something to keep an eye out for, especially as we see attempts to gut IDR plans and potentially even these plans, but it is worth knowing. And I really want to talk about Parent Plus loans really quickly because Parent Plus loans are unlike regular student loans in the sense that they do not qualify for everything. So as I said before, the only income-driven repayment plan that Parent Plus loans are eligible for is the ICR plan. In order to become eligible for ICR, you do need to consolidate Parent Plus loans into a direct consolidation loan to then enroll it into ICR. That's a 25-year repayment period, meaning that you would need 300 credits to then have the remainder of the balance forgiven. And Parent Plus loans are also eligible for alternative plans. So you can enroll the loans in extended graduated or extended graduated. Now, I'm going to go over the loan simulator very quickly because it is an important tool for folks to take advantage of. I think it helps you to understand eligibility requirements. I do want to say that it's not 100% accurate, but it is a good place to start. I know that getting on the phone with your servicer could take hours for folks. So if that's something that you can't do, we understand and acknowledge that. So the loan simulator is a good place to start. So on the next slide here, we're just showing that if you go to studentaid.gov, go to the toolbar, find loan repayment, hover over it, you'll easily access the loan simulator. Once you click on that, it will show you these three options. We recommend clicking on, I want to find the best student loan repayment strategy, and then going through it that way. That tends to be the more simple option. What they do is they'll ask you, they'll have a list of questions such as, are you married? Are you working? Have you filed taxes in the last 2 years? You'll click all that apply. And then they will ask you to input any additional information such as income, family size, that sort of thing. We can go to the next slide. I think we might have some examples. No, it'll show you the list, but then once you confirm and input all of that information, your list of loans will appear here as is on the left-hand side. You'll see all your loans listed out. Confirm that that looks correct, you'll click on continue, and then it will ask you if you would like to see repayment options for public service loan forgiveness. So if that's you, if that's applicable to you, make sure that you click yes so that it will show you only the plans that are eligible for PSLF. Not every repayment plan is an eligible plan for that program, and so it's really important for you to know what works if you're trying to pursue that loan forgiveness. And then once you click on that, it's going to ask you what your primary repayment goal is. When you see that, you want to click on have a low monthly payment. Once you click on that, I believe it will then show you your results. So it will tell you what they estimate you will pay per month, and it will show you the recommended repayment plan. So in this case, the example shows that this person would pay $228 per month on the pay plan. The pay plan is an eligible plan for public service loan forgiveness, and it gives you that estimate. It's also worth noting that the payment period will say up to 20 years. It doesn't often take into consideration how long you've already been working towards repayment. So don't be alarmed by that. And then I recommend folks scroll down, and at that point, it will have that button on the right-hand side that says view and compare all plans. You would then be able to see the other plans that you're eligible for and if there's something else that you prefer. So that is the loan simulator. Again, our I would say our recommendation would be to call your servicer to get a more accurate quote on what your monthly payment would be. However, we do understand that not everyone has that time. So you can either use the loan simulator or the servicer to find out what works best for you and to figure out what your monthly payment would look like on another repayment plan. Okay, now let's jump into the SAVE plan and what's going on with that. So Right now, there are lawsuits against the SAFE plan and there are impacts on borrowers. So, with these ongoing cases, there has been a court order that essentially prevents the Department of Education from offering the plan with this ongoing litigation. So, the SAFE plan has been removed from all IDR applications and no one can apply for the plan, as we've said. All borrowers, there were about 8 million people enrolled in SAVE, have been placed into an administrative forbearance because servicers cannot bill folks properly at this time. So no one is required, if you're in this SAVE forbearance, no one is required to make a payment, and interest is not accruing during this time. Now, if you've been seeing interest appear on your monthly statement or anything like that, it's worth noting that we've been told by our colleagues before they were fired by the Department of Ed, trusted folks, that different servicers process interest differently. So some, like Advantage, will continuously show interest accruing. However, once the safe forbearance end, they will retroactively remove that interest accrual. Other servicers like Mohila might not show the interest accruing, they remove it on a month-to-month basis. So it really does depend. If you feel like there's something fishy, something wrong with your account, you can contact your servicer to see if they can clarify that for you. So that's worth noting. And then I'll say it again, that if you've if you're enrolled in the SAVE plan, but you're at that 20 to 25-year mark, you may want to consider enrolling in the IDR plan to have your loans forgiven through IDR forgiveness. Now, on the next slide, it's really important to note, especially if you're working towards any type of forgiveness, that PSLF and IDR, so public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment forgiveness credits, are not being counted during this forbearance. So if you are at 117 PSLF credits and you're working in a current public service employer, you're not getting credits during this time, and you may want to consider switching out so that you hit that 120 mark. Same thing applies to folks working towards IDR forgiveness, working towards 240 or 300 credits. If you're almost at that mark, we recommend getting out of the safe forbearance and actively entering back into repayment on another IDR plan. That's something to consider. For folks who are working towards PSLF, if you're already at 120 and you're in this limbo and maybe you were in a forbearance period or something, there is a program called the PSLF buyback program. That's also a good program for folks who are no longer working in a public service job, but you have the 10 years of employment. We recommend looking into this on studentaid.gov. It is really complex and hard to explain it on a webinar, so I'm not going to go very in depth on this, but I do recommend that you check that out because this may be something that you can do and take advantage of and have your loans forgiven. So take a look at PSLF buyback if that applies to you. Now, again, just breaking it down one more time, should I get out of SAVE and apply for another IDR plan? We recommend that folks should consider getting out of SAVE if you want to continue receiving PSLF credits and IDR credits. If you're close to the PSLF or IDR threshold, that is really important and we recommend getting out of it. You might want to consider sticking with SAVE if you don't mind not receiving PSLF or IDR credits, if you'd like to remain in an interest-free forbearance, and if you would benefit from not having to make a payment. I personally am working towards public service loan forgiveness, but I made the safe forbearance because it benefits me to not have to make a payment and I'm not close to the 120. Again, this is a personal decision, so whether or not you should stay or get out of the plan, that is up to you. But those are some of our recommendations for folks who find themselves in this limbo and don't know what to do. So if you're looking to apply for an IDR plan, you can do so either online at studentaid.gov or via paper application. We recommend using the online application. It is faster and just you can track it on studentaid.gov as well. You can track that application status. So worth noting, if you do the paper form, you can also print it out or download it and then upload it to your servicer's website as well. And for both the online and paper application, you will need to provide income documentation. So a recent tax return, transcript, a W-2, a pay stub, anything of that nature to show what your income is. Will be needed for the application. It's also worth noting that processing times are extremely delayed and can take upwards of 60 days to process your application. What the process is supposed to look like is you submit that application, and because it's taking so long, you're placed into a processing forbearance. However, if you are not, you can call your servicer and demand to be placed into one because you do have a right to be placed into one. So keep that in mind that if you get a bill and it just you're not supposed to get one, you're supposed to be placed into another repayment plan, you can call your servicer and request a processing forbearance. It's also really important to note that if you've submitted an application prior to January 2025, prior or right around, early January, whenever, even prior to that, we recommend that you fill out a new application. We've seen a lot of folks wait months for their application, but what it really means is that it's lost out there. They've lost your application, they just don't have it. So I recommend that if you applied prior around January or prior to it, please submit another application. It's really important. And again, a reminder that if you're applying for an IDR plan, you need all of this information. So your permanent and or mailing address, family size info, employment information and address, income documentation, and even if in the past you've opted into IRS integration in which the Department of Ed and IRS communicate so that they have your information on file, folks are still required to provide that documentation at this time. Um, I know it's an annoying process, but it is something that folks are required to do at this time.
And Sabrina, something NextGen brought up to us last week on the income documentation, just to let folks know, you don't need all of this information. You need something, one of these pieces to prove your
Right.
income.
Exactly. Thank you for flagging that, Natalia. That's really important. You don't need all of this. You just need one piece. And I just saw a comment here in the Q&A. I also received an email, Mohila, I believe. I'm not sure if it was every servicer, but a lot of folks received an email saying that interest during a forbearance is accruing. That was according to what we read, that email was sent out mistakenly. So if you are enrolled in the Save Forbearance, interest is not accruing during that forbearance. That was sent in as a mistake, which, surprise, surprise, is not a shocker that Mohila would do something like that. They've sent many incorrect emails before. So if you want to call, you can to verify that the interest is not accruing, but that was sent out as a mistake. That is important to note. All right, with that, I'm going to toss it over to Natalia. Hang on tight, folks. We're going to cover what to do if you can't afford your payments, as well as public service loan forgiveness, which I know many of you are hoping to pursue.
Thank you, Sabrina. And we know this is a lot of information. Everyone will receive a recording after this call. So if you miss something, you can always go back. But we've walked through what type of student loan you have, the better repayment programs being income-driven repayment than the alternative plans. But if none of that works for you, then what do you do? And also, if it's a temporary emergency, you are dealing with a healthcare issue or a family issue. So there is forbearance. This is, well, and we'll go over the different types of forbearance, but this is different than the SAVE forbearance. This is a voluntary forbearance, one that you ask for. Will allow you to temporarily stop making monthly payments and make smaller payments, although you don't have to make a payment. You will not make any progress towards forgiveness or your IDR counts if you were in an IDR program. And interest does accrue. I'll also add that when you get out of a forbearance, your loan compounds and capitalizes. And so this is how folks see a smaller loan balance grow and grow by doing multiple forbearances. However, both of these, forbearance and deferment, are better than falling into default. There are different types of deferments. This also allows you to stop temporarily making payments and interest will accrue. But there are some specific deferments for cancer treatments, for economic hardship, an in-school deferment. When you go back to school, you're placed into a deferment. And if you have a unsubsidized loan, interest is accruing. So definitely look at these options if you feel that the payment is far too high on income-driven repayment or on the alternative plans. Because if you don't make a payment, this is what happens. So on the first day, you're technically past due or delinquent. Where it starts to get really scary is 90 days past due. This is when your delinquency is reported to the credit bureaus. There was a recent report in the Washington Post where borrowers that were in late stage delinquency were seeing their credit scores drop more than 100 points. We don't want that to happen to you. So, try to get into a repayment program, alternative plan, or even a forbearance so you can avoid it being reported to your credit. After 9 months of being past due, and I want to remind folks that under President Biden, there was what was called the on-ramp. That ended September 30th of last year of 2024. That means coming up in July, if you have not made a payment, that would be those 9 months or 270 days past due, depending on when your loan payment was, which would mean you were in default. So if you have not made a payment since the pandemic, you really need to move fast on getting into a repayment program or a forbearance or deferment so you don't fall into default. We do expect millions of borrowers to fall into default who have not made a payment since the COVID pandemic pause. When this happens, there's a few options. If you are currently in default or afraid of default, there is loan rehabilitation or loan consolidation, and I'll go over that in a moment. Many folks have heard about default in the news. There was a lot of news on the fact that the Department of Ed and the administration resumed collections for defaulted borrowers. So this means that they can garnish up to and do 15% of your wages. They can take your tax return, and this is what was turned back on. In a last, 11th hour save last week, we did just find out that Social Security recipients will not have their Social Security garnished. Unfortunately, it's only Social Security recipients. So if you're in default, what do? There's loan rehabilitation. You can only do this once, but you can make 9 monthly payments as little as $5 over 10 months. If you want to do loan rehabilitation, it will be a lengthy call where you go over kind of your finances, what you can afford, what you can't. But it does stop collections and it will get you out of default. There's also loan consolidation if you have not done it already. This is the process of converting or combining your loans into a direct consolidation loan and creating a new one. To qualify, though, if you're trying to get out of default, you would have to agree to repay enroll in an income-driven repayment plan and make 3 full on-time payments before you consolidate. You can consolidate a single loan as long as you haven't already, as long as it's not a single direct consolidation loan. So if you didn't consolidate in the last few years, you've fallen into default, consider loan consolidation or rehabilitation. I will also say if you are in default or afraid of default, and I'm sure Angel can share this in the chat, please contact us. We want to make sure that you don't fall into default, or we do everything we can to avoid that. Because if you are in default, it gets even scarier than reporting to the credit bureau. So this is reported for 7.5 years. They can add up to 40% of the original loan amount. They can garnish your wages, not Social Security. We will update that. That has changed. Sent to collections. The entire amount is due, which is outrageous because most people do not have that money. That's why they fell into default, and you're ineligible for any new aid or aid as a parent for your child. So again, please contact us if you feel that this applies to you. Okay, so there's different forbearances that Sabrina and I have talked about through this call. So there's the traditional forbearance, which is typically used when you cannot afford your payments. This is when you call and ask to be placed into a forbearance. None of the time spent in this forbearance will count towards income-driven repayment or public service loan forgiveness. Then there's the SAVE administrative forbearance. This was involuntary. You were placed into this with no request or no choice to be put into this. You will not receive public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment The difference between the save forbearance and the other two is no interest accrues and no payments are required. Very important to note. The processing forbearance is exactly that. When they are processing you into an income-driven repayment program, which is a period of 60 days, you will accrue interest. However, time spent in this forbearance will count towards public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment. We know many people that are just a few credits away from getting their public service loan forgiveness credits, and they are changing into an income-driven repayment. And just from the processing time, they're reaching their 120. And we're going to get into what that 120 means right now. So public service loan forgiveness. This is a program that is offered to people that work in public service. It started October 1st, 2007. And that's important because while we thank you so much for any time spent prior to that, the program itself, you can only start counting credits as of October of 2007. You need 120 monthly on-time payments, which is 10 years. And that plus is that you have to keep making payments until your application is approved and the money is removed from your account. When you go to studentaid.gov and it says 0, which is like the happiest day ever. Payments are cumulative, not consecutive. We know a lot of people go in and out of their public service jobs. So it doesn't have to be a consecutive 10 years, but you do need to have 120 monthly payments to count. This is an all or nothing thing. So unfortunately, 95 or 105 will not cut it. You have to be at 120. All remaining debt is tax-free on the federal level and on the state level as well. For Californians, we know this is a California workshop. So one of the great things that our coalition and our legislators have done is made sure that public service loan forgiveness never will be taxed. You have to make sure you reach all the criteria. Do you have a direct loan? That is the most important thing. You can always consolidate to a direct loan, but you have to have a direct loan. You need to make sure your employer qualifies. You need to make sure you're in the qualifying repayment plan. We strongly encourage you to document your employment using the PSLF form and the PSLF help tool, which I'm sure can be shared right now in the chat. And then you make sure everything's in check and apply after 120 qualifying payments. When you combine public service loan forgiveness with income-driven repayment, you reach the maximum benefit. The goal is to pay as little as possible for those 10 years and then have as much possible forgiven through the PSLF program. Here's a quick slide on what does qualify. So all of the direct loans, including direct parent plus loan. I will note that the parent needs to be working in the qualifying job, not their child that they took the loan out for. Employers, all levels of government, 501c3 nonprofits, NextGen and Student Debt Crisis Center qualify. Other critical public service, if you are a nurse at a nonprofit hospital, police officers, firefighters, they're all able to get public service loan forgiveness. Now, in terms of the plans, you need to have the 10-year standard. Many people go in and out of income-driven repayment programs, and if you have the 10-year standard, that time will count. The ICR plan, the pay-as-you-earn plan, and the income-based repayment plan. All of the income-driven repayment plans count. Unfortunately, the older loan types, those FFELP loans don't count, or Perkins, but you can consolidate into the direct loan program to start counting towards public service loan forgiveness. Defaulted loans do not count until they're brought back into good standing. And private loans never count. This is a federal program for federal loans. Employers. There are a lot of folks that maybe work for another company that work on government contracts. That does not count. Labor unions, absolutely, you can be a part of a labor union. This is if you work at, for example, the AFL-CIO or at the union itself. That does not count. And 501c4 nonprofit political leaning groups do not count either. In terms of the repayment plan, and this is why Sabrina walked you through that student loan simulator, and that will tell you if it qualifies or not. But those alternative plans do not count. The 30-year standard, so if you've consolidated and converted your loan into a 30-year loan versus 10, that time does not count. And time of deferment and forbearance, including in-school deferment. We know a lot of folks that start working in grad school, that time does not count until you're in active repayment. Just like income-driven repayment programs, we are seeing processing delays here. So public service loan forgiveness processing is still happening, but the delays are taking much longer than the previous 4 years. Reminder, and I keep saying this, you cannot leave your job until after your loans have been fully discharged. Now, if you've made payments over the 120, you are entitled to a refund. So it's quite possible that you'll see all of your loans forgiven, and then within a few months, you will receive a refund check for the months you've paid over. Again, this is why we strongly encourage you to use the PSLF help tool annually to make sure your credits are correct and everything is in order. Borrowers who enroll in another income-driven repayment plan should be placed into a processing forbearance. And just a reminder again, that time counts. So if you're very close to the 120, but you're on the safe forbearance and not actively getting credit right now, you could move into that processing forbearance and reach your 120. So I've talked a lot about consolidation. So just real quick, what is it? It's consolidating is about converting an older loan into a new direct loan, or combining all like 6, 11, many people have a lot of loans into a single loan. You're creating a new loan with a new payoff date. It can take anywhere from 30 to 60 days or more, because we see processing delays with all things student loans right now. If you can consolidate a single loan, for example, if you have a traditional Parent Plus loan, you can consolidate that into a direct consolidation loan. And you'd want to do that if you're looking to do PSLF. The requirements are having a single FFELP loan, these older loans, to convert into a direct loan. Or if you are consolidating existing direct loans, you must have multiple loans to combine it into one. We really want to stress that the only people that should be looking at consolidation right now are those that are looking to stop the default process, or if you have just recently got into a public service job and you have an older FFELP loan. We just came off a time period where it was the safest time to consolidate. However, right now, if you consolidate, you may erase some or all of your repayment history for income-driven repayment programs or public service loan forgiveness programs, because you're creating a new loan. So it's just, be very wary about this unless you're doing this specifically to get onto the public service loan plan or loan forgiveness plan, or if you're looking to keep default away. You can apply for consolidation in the same way you can apply for income-driven repayment programs or for public service loan forgiveness. We always tell our folks that work with us, studentaid.gov should be your North Star when it comes to all things student loans. You can do it online or a paper application. Be wary of these processing times because they're affecting everything to do with student loans. Okay, so we're almost there. Just quickly, some additional forms of loan forgiveness and cancellation. This could apply to you. If you are total and permanent disability discharge. So if you are not working at all, this provides full forgiveness for your federal loans if you're not working due to disability. You do need to have either the VA, Social Security Administration, or more than likely it's a medical professional sign off on this. You cannot be working at all, and there will be a 3-year monitoring period to ensure you are not working. But if you are disabled and unable to work, you can apply for TPD, or total and permanent disability discharge. And they have now resumed from the pause that went on earlier in the spring. There's also borrower defense to repayment. You may be eligible for a discharge of your federal loans if you attended a school that has misled you, engaged in other misconduct, violated certain laws. I believe there's a list of these schools. If you are currently on BD or borrower defense, you have been placed into a forbearance until next year as they sort out the law. There have been a few lawsuits that have been taken up for borrower defense, and so the laws are changing here as well. Then there's closed school discharge. So this is if your school closed within 180 days after you withdrew, you're entitled to get your money back. There is, through being a teacher, there's something called teacher loan forgiveness, which is separate from public service loan forgiveness. But if you teach for full time for 5 complete and consecutive, this one's consecutive academic years in a low income school or educational service agency, you could be eligible for $5,000 to $17,500 in forgiveness. This cannot be done at the same time as public service loan forgiveness. And as you can see, that probably would not cover your entire loan balance. The service requirement on this, though, however, is 5 years versus 10 years. And then these last ones I'm not going to go through. They're exactly what they say. But if somebody took out a loan in your name and it wasn't you, that's false certification. Perkins are loans that are given to you by the school. There is Perkins loans forgiveness and a discharge, unpaid refund, and your federal student loans do die with you. This is nothing you will pass on to your loved ones. With all of this, there's so much going on, so many changes that we expect to see with reconciliation. It just allows, sadly, for more scams out there. So we know there's a lot of debt relief scams. Everything we've talked to you about today is completely free of charge, 100% free of charge at studentaid.gov. But be wary of bait and switch approaches that are saying deadline is approaching, or they'll provide immediate loan forgiveness. They typically offer to do a consolidation or enroll you in an income-driven repayment program for a very large fee. Some of these companies will claim to be the Department of Education when in fact they're not. So please just keep an eye out. We have borrowers all the time write us saying, is this a scam? Yes, most of the time. So with all this, the main takeaways: forbearance and deferment are 2 ways to temporarily pause your payments. That's different than the save forbearance, which is still ongoing. If you don't make payments after 270 days, your loan is in default, and 90 days, you are reported to the credit agencies. So take a look at repayment programs to try to avoid those 2 things. Those consequences, again, are wage garnishment, loan set to collections, and it's so sad, but withheld things like a passport. We have not seen that done, so I don't want to spread fear, but they technically are able to withhold your passport. Okay, so what can you do right now? We went over this earlier, but make sure you know who your servicer is and you have access to the account as well as studentaid.gov. Save and document any communication with your servicer. Print, download, screenshot everything you can that would show your public service loan forgiveness credits or your IDEA credits if it shows up. Consider enrolling an income-based repayment. This is an older plan, however, it's been written into law, so we have been told at the moment it's the most secure plan. We don't know what will happen, but we are going to communicate with everyone as much as possible when there are changes to the student loan program. If you have issues or complaints or feel that something's gone wrong with your student loan, you can go to the FSA Feedback Center. I will say, with the reduction in force, we have been hearing from student loan borrowers that there's not a lot of response. So you can submit complaints to your state, local representatives, your federal representatives, our state attorney general. I will say Attorney General Bonta has been a true champion when it comes to student loans. So we're very lucky here in California. You can communicate with your loan servicer. And then there also is a casework tool, which I believe Angel will share in the chat. This is a way to contact your federal representatives. Every federal office has caseworkers that can help you with your student loan. If you feel that something has been done in error, for example, that interest being added or not, you can write to your federal representative's caseworker. And that caseworker tool makes it easier to do and know how to contact. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kimberly.
Thanks, Natalia, and thanks to everyone for hanging in there these last few minutes. So the Student Loan Empowerment Network, or SLEN, as you see on the screen, is a network of 14 nonprofit orgs who, in partnership with the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, provide free and individualized education, case management, and assistance for those who have student loans in California. So on the screen, you'll see the link, and feel free to reach out to the Student Loan Empowerment Network for free and individualized help with your student loans. And like we've been mentioning, we'll share out the slides too, so it'll be included in those resources.
Thank you, Kimberly. And I mean it this time, we are almost done. Oh, yeah, just Kimberly wanted to give important California links, correct?
Yeah. So, just additional resources in California, we do have our own student loan ombudsperson. Like we've been mentioning, if you have any questions, complaints with your loans, feel free to reach out directly to our loan ombudsperson here. Her email is on the screen. She does reply to each email that she receives, and it's just good to have that paper trail.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kimberly. And we wanted to share at Student Debt Crisis Center a volunteer opportunity. If you'd like to get involved with us more, we are hosting and actually they're going to be an hour and a half long trainings to share resources that you can share with your loved ones, friends, colleagues, your networks at work. Frankly, we need to get the word out, and trying to create a network, an old-fashioned phone tree that when there are changes, we can get that out to as many people as possible. It can be as simple as just attending the training and getting more help with your student loans, but posting to social media, sending an email to friends. We are just looking for volunteers to join us, and Angel will share that link in the chat. And if you'd like to be on our mailing list, you can visit us at student@crisis.org. You can visit NextGen at nextgenpolicy.org. Follow us on social media. Again, I always say it's not a shameless plug. This is where we're probably the first place we're going to communicate updates, and then we send an email to our mailing list. You can follow SDCC at debtcrisis.org on all accounts, and NextGen at NextGen_policy on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook. And with that, I'm going to throw it to Sabrina just to go over a few frequently asked questions
Thanks,
and
Natalia.
any other questions in the chat.
Perfect. All right, so what can folks do if their loans are delinquent or past due? So if you are past due on your loans, you can apply for a forbearance or a deferment. Those are options to bring your loan back into good standing. You can also pay the outstanding amount if you're able to bring the loan back into good standing. You can also visit studentaid.gov to find out more information if your loans are delinquent. Now, if your loans are in default, meaning that it's been past due more than 9 months, you can either go through a process called loan rehabilitation or go through a loan consolidation if your loans are unconsolidated, to essentially create a new loan and bring you back into good standing, and then enroll in an income-driven repayment plan so that you have the lowest monthly payment possible to prevent you from getting into default again. So there are options for folks who are struggling financially, as Natalia mentioned previously. We saw the question if for folks who are pursuing PSLF but are currently in SAVE. I mentioned getting out of SAVE. What I meant by that is getting out of the plan and essentially applying for another repayment plan, switching your repayment plan. That's what we mean when we're saying get out. So if you're pursuing PSLF and you're currently in the SAVE forbearance, what can you do to resume PSLF progress? You can apply for another plan. So you can apply for IBR, pay, or ICR so that you can get back into repayment and continue getting those PSLF credits. When can we expect IDR processing to resume? So we're seeing that servicers are slowly starting to process applications again. However, as we said, the processing is extremely backlogged. they haven't processed more than 5% of the pending applications, which is crazy and ridiculous. And so it is taking a really long time. If you apply for an IDR plan, you can call your servicer and be proactive and request to be placed into that processing forbearance. But if you don't do that and you see that you're being billed, you can call and say, I demand to be placed into that processing forbearance. You do have a right to be placed into that for up to 60 days. Um, but if I applied for an IDR plan months ago and my application is still not processed, should I reapply? The answer to that is yes. If you applied, especially prior to January, we recommend resubmitting another application for your IDR plan. Now, if you applied for a consolidation and the application is still not processed, it's really important to note that because of the current regulations, there is a chance that you may have to start or you may lose repayment history. We don't know 100% what it would mean to consolidate right now, meaning we don't know if you'd have to start over from scratch in terms of repayment, as if it was a new loan, or if you would lose credits, um, and have a weighted average or something along those lines. So it's very tricky right now in terms of consolidation, unless you have an older loan type where you have a FFEL loan and you're working towards public service loan forgiveness, you would need to consolidate that loan into a direct loan in order to be eligible for loan forgiveness. If you have multiple loans, and they're all from the same timeline, and you're just thinking about consolidating, we actually do not recommend consolidating at this time unless you really, really want to, but we recommend going to studentaid.gov and reading the pros and cons of consolidation right now because that could result in you losing payment history. So that is really important for folks to note. I think Angel has done an incredible job of tackling the Q&A, so I appreciate that, Angel. Let me just take a look here at the remaining questions. If I'm in the state forbearance, do I need to be applying for another plan now? You can if you'd like to. You don't have to. Again, it's a personal decision. If you want to work towards public service loan forgiveness and start making payments, you can. But if you want to wait until the courts make a decision on save and the plan goes away or whatever happens, you can also do that. Someone else said, I don't have PSLF, but have worked for nonprofits ever since getting my loan.
That's a
They
good
have only been
question.
part-time. Yeah, they have only been part-time,
Oh,
so I never qualified.
that's
Yeah.
it. Just a good point. It is full-time work or 30 hours or more in order to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. However, if you're just hearing about the program and you have worked full-time, that time will count, even
Mhm.
if today you're just learning about the program.
Exactly. Yep. And also, if you work for two qualifying employers on a part-time basis, those hours, if they add up to 30 or more, do count towards public service loan forgiveness. So that is worth noting. Now, we have a list of resources here tomorrow. So about 24 hours from now, you will receive an email from Zoom, which will have a recording of today and additional resources that we are sharing out. So you will get that. So keep an eye out for that. If you do have questions, you can reach out to us at Student Debt Crisis Center at info@studentdebtcrisis.org. You can also reach out to NextGen. I know that their team is also very well equipped and can connect y'all to us if needed as well. Um, I believe those are all of the slides. Thank you for joining us, and I'll kick it back to you, Natalia, since you got us started.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for co-hosting, Kimberly, with NextGen Policy. We are here for you. Please reach out and we will continue to communicate changes. Thank you so much.